If two people have the same memory of grabbing goes, it's like,
Alright. Since you guys have noticed that he's a Scottish guy. So I'm looking forward to your best Scottish accent throughout this the next couple of weeks, please. Every time you read, I would like to... No, I'm just kidding. You can if you want to, but you don't have to. Start today. I would like you to respond to this Section A style short questions. This would be like a ABC style question, typically in a Section A style section. So number one, outline Locke's theory of identity. I want you to give me a brief overview, summary, outline. You need to hit the two important points, or you need to give me a good enough outline of the major points in his theory. Then explain one objection. That's another 2 marks, and then evaluate Locke's theory in the light of this objection. Is the objection a knockdown argument against Locke? Is it going to show that he's wrong and you need to change his theory? Or is he going to be able to cope? It's a 6-mark question, so in the exam you have about 10 minutes, 12 minutes. So we'll do about that from now. Sound good? Go for it.
Checkmated.
Are you doing the end like?
How does that say checkmated?
I was rushing the end because I got a little bit distracted. So
After you have your child, imagine reading.
I won't know like that. I was just ready.
I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna add that just in case.
It could be possible. It is.
So now I have to do
It sucks.
Yeah, because English is like the most important.
Alright, hand up if you gave your partner 2 marks.
Yes.
Oh, not a partner. Hand up if you gave your partner 1 mark. Hand up if you gave your partner no marks.
Oh no, it's alright.
Alright, hand up if your partner said whether Locke's theory survives or not, or is good in light of the objection or not. Hand up if you said that. Okay, few people. Do we run out of time to get this bit done?
Yes.
Yeah, a little bit. I got distracted.
Alright, fair enough. So you probably get 1 mark for saying whether Locke's theory can respond well to this objection or not, and then another mark for explaining why. Yeah? You've got to do that. Even if in your objection you've outlined why Locke's theory is bad, and you're just agreeing with that again, you like to say, I see no way that Locke can counter the point that, and then explaining the point of the objection again. Even that will be useful in terms of explaining why you don't think he can survive the objection. Does that make sense? So it's best, right? Most objection sections are in like section B and section C, right? Yeah. So it's best to explain away, or at least attempt a way that Locke can try and like fight back. Yeah? You could say that Locke might try to cope with the brave officer paradox by saying that if your previous self includes someone that remembers also being someone external to the previous the present consciousness, then we can adapt the theory to say that that person is also included in the current person. Yeah? But then you might say, however, this is not really in the spirit of Locke's theory, since our consciousness would no longer extend in the present moment to that person. Because Locke would not accept this, his theory is not logical. Yeah? In response to the brave officer paradox. Or Locke would be happy to accept this change to his theory, and so he can cope with the brave officer paradox. Do you guys think he would?
No.
Nah, he's pretty set on this consciousness idea. Yeah. All right. Any other questions? Excellent. All right. Briefly before we move on, we are naming the school chickens.
Oh my god.
We are?
Oh, why?
Lunch, dinner, and
So options include lunch, dinner, and breakfast. Nuggets, Schnitzel, and Kiev. Gerald, Harold, and Jerry.
eating out of Illinois.
KFC, Nando's, and bread. Eggling, Big Bird, and Ugly Duckling. Maybe that might be my favourite actually. Kind of like that one.
Big bird and ugly
Or you can add another section as well.
Other.
Other down here.
Ellen, Albert, and George. Well, I'm pretty sure these are all girl names. Why is it George?
So I don't know, but I'm going to post this link on our Facebook page, and you guys can go there and you can vote for the names of the chickens if
Yeah, but like,
you
yeah,
like.
I know, but like, oh, I'm doing it right now. Actually. Why?
Bonus marks if you get them named up.
Actually,
George and Albert are two of them.
Okay,
I love it. That'd be great.
One of them huge.
No, one's like, and they cause gonna go into like an existential crisis if you actually.
So what it's like to be
Alrighty. Alright, let's look at Hume.
If you woke up in the body of the chicken George.
First of all, let's do the activity that's at the start of the textbook because I kind of like it. So everyone needs to close your eyes. It's a close your eyes activity. And try to do this one thing. Identify yourself. The task is to try and capture the essence of you. Where is the I that you think of as yourself? So turn your mind inwards, it says, and find your true self. Take whatever time you need. A couple of key questions that sometimes help. Try and think about where you locate yourself mentally. I think of myself as being in a particular, my mind as being in a particular place. And you might find the same thing. Try and look for some sort of baseline experience maybe that you always have. What does it feel like to be you all the time? That's the question. 5 seconds. And Owen. How'd you go? I didn't give you much time. Hand up if you locate yourself somewhere physically. When you think of me, I think of myself as being in a particular place in my body. Does anyone know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Brian, where do you find yourself?
In the head.
In the head?
Yeah.
Yeah, back of the head, front of the head? Just the whole head?
Just the front.
The front?
Yeah.
Yeah? Nice one. Okay. Hand up if you find yourself somewhere in the head, probably at the front. Interesting. Hand up if you find yourself somewhere in the chest. Does anyone think of themselves as in the chest? Hand up if you're the stomach.
When I'm hungry.
When I'm hungry. In the stomach? Yeah, no, that's fine. Anyone in the hands or toes? I've never had one, but I always ask.
My leg.
I find myself right behind my eyes. I think of myself as being behind my eyes, so that's where I am. But my wife thinks of herself as being right in her chest, right behind the sternum. Yeah? Alright, the essence of you, constant baseline of experience. Does anyone, can anyone think about what it likes to feel like to be them all the time? Is there a constant experience?
Yeah.
There is? There's a Kevin-ness? 6'3". It's not Kevin-ness, it's called being 6'3".
Yeah, same guy.
Jeremy's saying.
Same guy.
Nice.
Can we write that?
Alright.
Oh yeah, I did.
So, David Hume, we're going to look at some of his concepts. I'm going to tell you his big theories before we start, and then we're going to read the text. Sound good?
Yeah, sure.
So, as we go through this, I'm going to want you to make some notes. So, grab out some space in your exercise book or wherever you write your notes. David Hume.
I really don't want to do it today. I'd rather finish it here.
Alright. Just before we do start that, you'll notice that I've very nicely given you all of Hume's arguments throughout the whole paper in standard form in this table. Does everyone see that?
Yeah, that is great.
So, the idea that as we read through the text, probably more for homework, I'll be asking you to look at these arguments that we've read through them in standard form. As usual, you'll need to try and know these arguments as best you can, because you could be asked about, obviously, any of them on your SAXA exam. And then writing evaluations next to the side. Is this a strong argument? What premise do you think is weak? That kind of stuff would be useful. The other thing that I didn't get around to printing this morning for you is like a translation text. It's pretty similar to the other one we had for law. I'll print. Does everyone want to print a copy of this, or should I just put it up on Compass? Alright, so I'll try and print that for next time. And then we have the text itself, which I decided you deserve colour for this time. You guys like that in the front? Wow. It's expensive.
It's got colour.
Alright, so David Hume, this guy, is a Scottish philosopher. Any guesses what age he went to university?
13.
Who was that?
Which one? 12?
12!
Ah,
Hang on.
genius.
Yeah, he went to university when he was 12. How crazy. His older brother was going to university, and his mum, who was a single mum, was like, hey, you know maths and English and all that stuff pretty good, you should just go along with your brother. I don't know, maybe she just wanted the house to herself as well, right? Who knows, right? Either way, he's a crazy smart guy. He became reasonably well known. Actually, he became well known as a historian first. He wrote a big book called The History of England, and that made him really famous, but he thought of himself as a philosopher first. He wrote this treatise, or massive volume, called A Treatise of Human Nature. Yeah, it's like, this is the way we are, guys. Everything about us. He wrote it in 3 volumes. Volume 1, Volume 2, and Volume 3. And I'm pretty sure our section is Volume... Book 1. Book 1 of The Understanding, which is in Volume... I think this one. No, this is all of The Understanding. Book 1, whatever book this is in 3 parts, maybe. Anyway, here we go. Let's finish through this. I've already done that. This was because I wrote this PowerPoint last time. Here we go. He's one of the easier to read philosophers, not because of his language. Like, language is still old, right? But he writes in a fairly straightforward, a semi-casual way. Not as casual as Descartes, but semi-casual. He's Scottish. He was one of the big 3 empiricists. Next to John Locke was one of the other empiricists. And a guy called George Berkeley, who's the idealism guy. Do you guys remember George Berkeley? We talked about him. He's the guy who thinks that everything is ideas. Everything's in the mind. Nothing's material. Yeah? Remember that? Cool. So, I'm going to skip through some slides because I made this PowerPoint a while ago. Alright, we're going to look at 4 big ideas before we start reading the text. Maybe just dot point these as like an overview thing to start with. So we're going to look at empiricism again. We've already covered empiricism a bit with Locke, but we're going to cover it again. We're going to look at perception, ideas, and impressions. 2 separate concepts for Hume that you need to understand. We're going to talk about introspection as awareness of changing impressions. So self-consciousness, what does it mean to be self-conscious, aware of yourself? What does that mean? And then finally, we're going to look at his theory, which is called bundle theory. So Locke, maybe we'll call that consciousness-centered theory, or consciousness-extended theory, something like that. Hume, we'll say, is called bundle theory. So empiricism, perception, ideas and impressions. What does it mean to be self-conscious? What does it mean to think about ourselves, to look inwards? Bundle theory. Have you guys seen that one in the middle before?
Oh, yeah.
Tricky.
One is actually
Is there 3 or 4 or 1 or 2 or what?
one.
Well, it depends on where you. That one.
It's four.
Wait a sec.
You
It's
can
four.
get it from one
Let's
person, it's
see,
4,
yeah.
and from the other person, it's 3.
Yeah,
Oh.
because
Four.
they.
Not
Yeah.
like
No,
that.
it's three.
Not like that.
There's one.
Well, sir, let me break
One
up
line.
the image real quick.
Yeah.
Let me take it. Send it to me. I'll do it in paint.
It's an impossible image. It's like, you guys ever seen any MC Escher paintings?
Wait, what do you mean? It's
The ones with all the stairs?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're impossible
Another
images.
four.
So this one, if you notice things like this line here, forms the bottom line of this stick, but also the top line of this stick, even though there's no
Yeah.
joining top. So it's just an optical illusion, this one. Yeah. This one. There's another one that makes a difference, that is actually different. Like, for example, there's another one where there's a 6 written on the ground, right? And the guy's looking at the 6, but then the guy on the other side is saying that's a 9. Does that make sense? Yeah, I saw an interesting reaction to that a while ago, which was, like everyone sees the world differently. We all have different truths, right, about the world.
And then someone just says, not one of them has to be wrong.
Yeah, and then I saw another comment from one of my friends who was like, no, like the person who wrote that meant it to be a 6 or a 9. You need to like back up, orient yourself. Like, is it on a building? What's going on? Yeah, it's going to be one or the other. It's kind of interesting. Kind of works both ways. All right, we're doing empiricism first. So, can anyone tell us what empiricism is again?
Your knowledge comes from experience.
Good, your knowledge comes from experience. Let's just dive into that theory a little bit more. It came out of the rise of experimental science, right? Science used to be much more rational, much more like thought experimental, and then it started becoming much more experimental when people started like dropping bowling balls off the leaning tower of Pisa, stuff like that. Yeah. So it developed in the 17th, 18th centuries. John Locke, George Berkeley, David Hume, all really big empiricists. So the idea that all concepts originate in experience, right? So all concepts are about or applicable to things that can be experienced. All rationally acceptable beliefs or propositions are justifiable or knowable only through experience. Not only do all our ideas come from experience, but all of our beliefs are justifiable only in the light of experience. Who is that really different to? Yeah, who's a famous rationalist we studied? Plato we will, but who else? Descartes, right? Descartes, massive rationalist. I think therefore I am, right? I think therefore I am. Everything comes from thought, from rationality.
And nothing can be trusted.
Not so much for empiricists. Empiricists, well, so there's this idea of rationalism is really at odds with this idea of empiricism. Yeah? They're having this massive fight. We've done rationalism and empiricism a fair bit. Are we pretty clear on the basic distinction?
Yeah.
Cool. Let's dive in a little bit to some of the differences. Alright, we just needed that as a base to get to this bit. So, perception. Because Hume was an empiricist, he thinks that all our ideas, everything we're ever conscious of, begins with experience. That is sensory impressions. So let's write down impressions. That's a really key term for Hume. And I want you to write, impressions are, for Hume, primary mental experience.
I think it would both hand in hand together.
Impressions include things like, what are we talking about, guys? What sort of stuff?
Like concrete.
That's a thing, isn't it? But what's our impression of concrete?
No, I'm talking about concrete facts.
Ah, concrete
Like
facts.
mathematical, like
Yeah,
the
yeah.
weight of the mass of it.
Okay, cool. I normally start with some pretty basic impressions, like the smell of peppermint, right? Or the taste of ice cream. That's an impression you can have. Yeah? Or the color green, like what something looks like when it looks green to you. Yeah? But not just things like that, also things like pain, right? The sensation of pain, that's an impression.
How is it different?
Qualia is the what it's like to have that experience, right?
So it's like the smell of peppermint. So there's
Yeah.
a difference between smelling peppermint and knowing the smell of it, and there's a difference between the feeling of knowing how to smell peppermint.
The feeling is
Knowing the
There is a difference between the smell of peppermint and the awareness of what it's like to smell peppermint. For example, I can make a robot. Smell is little bits of chemicals float around in gas, right? And then they hit literally like little nose hair nerve receptor things, and your nose hair nerve receptor things, yeah, go, oh, this is that kind of atom, and then they send a particular kind of impression to your brain. Just like when light is a particular wavelength of photon, and it hits your eyes, yeah, and it hits the back of your retina, and your retina goes, ah, that's a particular kind of wavelength, and it sends an impression to your brain. Nothing like what is out in the world is anything like the impressions that you have in your brain, except that it like always corresponds with the way your brain interprets it. Yeah? Looking at does that make sense? Are we good? Of course. If you look at this, right, this one here, this is a certain wavelength. Let's say 160 nanometers, right? The light coming off this is 160 nanometers. The light coming off this one is 150 nanometers. The light coming off this one is 70 nanometers long, right? But that's the only difference. But we see them in a very different way. Our impressions aren't 180, right? 170, 67, right? We have this real impression of this kind of thing, right? I could tell a robot to measure the wavelengths, yeah? I could build a robot that could smell peppermint, yeah? And they would be able to correctly report what the atoms were or what the photon wavelength was. And that would be correctly reporting what's out there in the world. But feeling it, smelling like the smell of what it's like to smell peppermint, yeah? Or seeing the colour orange or yellow, yeah, is a feeling, is a what it's like to have that experience. That's qualia, yeah? The impression is I guess very related to the qualia, right? We have an impression, and for us it's a qualia experience. Yeah, it's a quali. But impressions are possible maybe like as just bits of sense data for robots. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Are we sort of good with that? With what impressions are?
Sir, I don't know what you're talking about that whole time.
The whole time.
Well, no, what? Like, I understand what you're saying, but which one were you referring to the whole time? Quality or impression?
Well, for us it's kind of the same, isn't it? Our impressions are quality. Yeah? Robots maybe, you could say, maybe could have a kind of impression as well. But we can't know if there's a what it's like for a robot to have an impression.
Sir, it's like first period. Why would you do this to us?
Alright, fair enough. Let's just take it back a notch then. Yeah? Peppermint smells a certain way, right? That's your impression. Yeah? Ice cream tastes a certain way. If you taste vanilla, it tastes different to chocolate, and your impression is different. That's what I'm talking about by impression. Is that clear? That's all we mean. It doesn't need to be any more complicated than that. Eric, you still with us? Yes? Okay, sorry?
As long as we put primary mental experience in the set, we'll get it up again.
Primary mental experience for Hume,
Yeah, for him.
but not for who? Descartes, right? For Descartes, the primary mental experience is our inner thought, right? Is our rational understanding. That's the primary mental experience for Descartes. But for Hume, it's very different, and this changes everything if you're an empiricist compared to if you're a rationalist, right? Because from these impressions, if you're an empiricist, we develop ideas. That's our second key term, so let's write that down as well. Ideas. Basic concepts which are built from our impressions. We cannot have an idea that is unrelated to an impression. So this is where it gets really different to rationalists, right? Because if we can't have an idea that's not an impression, all of our knowledge is based on our impressions. It's based on experience. Everything comes from experience. Can anyone think of an idea that you have that doesn't line up with an impression that you've had in the past?
The idea that Liverpool's actually Champions League.
The idea that Liverpool is going to win the Champions League, which is obviously never happened.
No, it's happened 5 times actually.
Has it ever happened that you guys have had the impression of?
Premier League.
Yeah, the Premier League.
They're changing their tone.
So we could have the idea that Liverpool might, at one point in the future, win the Champions League, right? Which is obviously an absurd proposition.
10 days.
Right? 10 days.
Shots fired.
The one I've got here is a grandma dragon eating purple ice cream. Can everyone please imagine that for a minute? A grandma dragon eating purple ice cream.
Yeah, I can actually imagine that.
Now, quick question. Has anybody actually seen a grandma dragon eating purple ice cream?
I've never seen a grandma dragon. It's a grandma dragon.
Exactly, you've never seen a grandma dragon,
Extremely
right?
dragon.
But everyone can imagine it, right? Everyone can form that idea really easily. Yeah? Are we all good with that? Okay, Hume says that's because we develop complex ideas, what he calls compound ideas, yeah, by putting together simple ideas which were all based on some sort of impression. So in this one, we know what a grandma is, and we've had an impression of a grandma. We know what a dragon is, and we've seen pictures in picture books. Yeah, we know what eating purple ice cream, maybe that's one thing, or ice and cream is, right? We know all those simple ideas, and we're able to put them together in our mind to form complex ideas or compound ideas. Everyone good with that? So even though I've never seen a grandma dragon eating purple ice cream, I know what all those concepts are individually, and I can put them in together in my mind to form the compound idea. Last bit before I get you write a note on that. Even my impression of basic things like an ice cube, yeah, they involve multiple simple impressions from which we form and combine ideas like cold, hard, small, wet, to create the complex idea ice cube. Yeah? Everything is broken down to the most basic sense impressions possible, the most basic ideas possible, and we can build up ideas from that even if we haven't had complex impressions. Does that make sense to everyone? Cool. Can you write down a note about what complex ideas or compound ideas are? Make sure you understand that concept. guys sad about my Liverpool gag?
No, I'm not. These
No,
guys.
I just asked you to write some notes. You didn't start talking about soccer.
No, I didn't. These guys are talking, but my team would clean all three of these guys up. Yeah, and you guys. These two. No, this one.
Watch next season, any chance on the street.
You're bragging about a premiership.
A premiership is a championship.
Yeah, you're bragging about a premiership player. That's how falling off the club. But these guys talking, this guy bragging about championship player. This guy is a transfer back. This guy better get used to bloody whoever they have, because he ain't getting off for 2 years.
For 2 years. 2 years
Two
ago.
transfer back. Two transfer.
If we get stuck with people.
No, he's not that.
What's the name?
It's a lot of it. He's not the dumb.
Wait, what the Hazard? What we taking Hazard?
Yeah, of course.
So basically, Hazard and everything is leaving how you play some less.
Ready for bundle theory?
Can't take anything as well, yeah? You guys can't take anything as well. He's gonna cycle.
That's a step down.
He's gonna cycle his way to Manchester. Running through
That's a step down. He's gonna. He might be.
He's gonna cycle his way to Manchester Airport. Pogba will take him his Mercedes.
You're not gonna do it. You're not gonna have.
Do you write down that?
Yeah, for a few months.
Yep, sure, why not?
No.
So isn't that
Ideas? It's for the year. 12 months. For the year. 12 months. They'll be back at the end of the year.
Very similar to idealism, yeah.
I'm not that
The
involved.
one that's banned Man City from the Champions League. Yeah, but if they win the Europa League, then they're already in. No, it would be 3. Arsenal and then
No, it was still before. What are you talking about? We're qualified. We're qualified already.
Tottenham,
I bet you guys can't tell what that is.
Arsenal.
Apple! I can draw.
Here you go, sir.
That's 4.
We need a band of
Alright, so bundle theory. This is me. Happy little guy. Now, I see an apple, and what are my instant impressions? What are the most basic impressions that we can describe?
Red.
Red's a good one. So I have like this sense of red. What else? Yeah, edible. I probably
circle.
Well, I'm going to put edible over here for now. And that's probably a complex idea. Yeah? But what are the most basic impressions else do we have?
Green.
Green.
Leaf.
I'm going to say this one's red.
No, green. The
Shiny. Shine. Hard. Or like hardness at least.
Wait, do you get to just see it or hold it as well?
I get to hold it as well.
Firm.
Lucky guy.
Oh, it has dots.
Juicy if I...
Dots.
What dots are you seeing?
No, an apple has dots normally.
Yeah,
What?
They actually do.
Dot.
Every apple has dots.
Dots. Yep. Good.
Exactly, yes.
Like, you know, little dimples on apples. You guys don't have those? You guys get the expensive apples.
Yeah, it's like
Alright. No, so from all this, right, I form this complex concept which I call an apple, right? Which is still pretty basic, but I form a complex concept of it. Yeah? Hume is going to say, controversially, right, that the apple is nothing but these things. An apple is nothing but its properties, according to Hume. Yeah? And I have to double check whether he's a realist or not, which means, does he think the apple really exists out in the world? If he's like George Berkeley, who's an idealist, he thinks that there's nothing else to the thing than the ideas and the impressions that we get of it, right? Like, what else is there to this duster than like the sense of blueness, the furriness, the smoothness, the particular hardness, its weight, that kind of stuff? What else is there to it, really, apart from its properties?
The ability to erase.
Nature.
The ability to erase, for sure. There's those things about it, right? It can do things or it can interact with other things, yeah? But for Hume, and I will double check this to make sure that I'm right, but for him, there's nothing to this beyond its properties. Yeah, there's no like essence of the erasiness. Yeah? Plato thinks that for every tree that's out in the world, there's like an ideal tree in the background, like in a heavenly sphere somewhere, that the tree is aiming to be like. And the tree has a kind of soul that's trying to like aspire towards perfect treeness, right? And he thinks that that's the way everything is. There's like an inner essence or spirit to stuff, but Hume is very different. He says there's nothing to anything except its properties. Yeah? Especially from our point of view. We can't know anything about anything apart from the properties. That just seems pretty self-evident, right? Okay. Getting trickier then. We can't know anything about ourselves except our own perceptions of ourselves. Yeah? We have these inner mental perceptions, like tiredness, maybe, or like glare from the window from Megan, right? Because the sun's just come just around, right? You have all these inner perceptions going on all the time. Like at any given moment, you'll be aware of like the weight of your jumper on your shoulders. You'll be aware maybe of like the muscles turning in your neck or your hips. You'll be aware of like a feeling of like, where is this going? Yeah?